You know, I really thought I was done with Critters. After sitting down and watching through the original 4 movies and suffering through the series' final installment, I really believed for a time that that was where it ended. However, after a certain somebody was left out of our watch party and I did some digging around, it turns out that the Critters franchise was not nearly as dead as I had originally believed. In fact, there were 2 very big pieces of Critters media that had slipped under my radar until now. Critters Attack and Critters A New Binge are a part of what I would like to call the new age of Critters, both being released in the same year of 2019, a whole 27 years after the release of Critters 4. These 2 entries attempted to breathe new life into the franchise and give a modern audience a new way to experience this obscure horror series. And they failed really badly. To nobody's surprise, both of these entries are really bad. Like, easily the worst the series has to offer. Do I like them less than Critters 4? No, absolutely not. There were parts of these entries that I loved to watch. But from an objective standpoint, both Critters Attack and Critters A New Binge represent the absolute lowest points of this now very dead horror franchise. Just like I did with the last video covering Critters, I hopped in a big VC with a bunch of my friends to watch through these new movies, jotting down stuff I found interesting about them as we went. I hope you're ready for more Critters insanity, because this video is going to have things in it that far exceed any of the madness from the previous 4 films combined. So, without further ado, let's delve into it. Starting things off, we have the first of these 2 new entries in the Critters franchise, Critters Attack. As I said before, Critters Attack was released in 2019 as the first made-for-TV film in the Critters franchise, bringing with it the first R rating the series had ever seen, as well as some new concepts and characters. And as you'd expect, this movie sucks. I don't like to be harsh right out the gates when talking about media, especially from a franchise I enjoy, but I have to just outright say it because my god is this movie miserable to watch. Other than the moments where the critters are up to their typical shenanigans, this movie is one of the most boring, stale experiences I have ever had with a movie. It never quite reaches Critters 4 levels of boredom, but it gets ridiculously close at times. The only saving grace this movie has is that the critters actually do get to do a lot this time around, with there being plenty of kills and goofy moments where they get to mess around. Does that save this movie from how awful it is? No, it doesn't. But at the very least, it made it so that we were able to finish it without feeling like we were forcing ourselves to truck through the entire thing. Critters Attack opens with us immediately getting some much needed Critters action, with their spaceship once again landing on Earth and giving us a cold open kill as some unfortunate delivery guy happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's after this that we properly get introduced to our cast of characters, and immediately the film's main problems are highlighted alongside them. These characters are so insanely boring. They have no personality, some of the most painful, awkward dialogue to listen to, and the movie tries so hard to make us care about them to the best of its ability, but it fails so badly at it. The one and only character in this entire film I was even remotely interested in was this old lady played by Dee Wallace, who has one of the most batshit insane character introductions I have ever seen.
I want her to, but I don't. What the fuck?
What the fuck?
Never mind, maybe
That
she'll
goes to
sound
the
like
critter
that.
chamber.
What is happening, Grandma?
Other than her, every other character is just boring and one note. They constantly participate in some kind of melodrama about the main character not getting into college, and when they aren't doing that, characters are just fighting about whatever else that has nothing to do with the main conflict of the movie, that being the alien invaders that are actively eating people. Speaking of which, in between these boring character introductions, we get to see quite a few scenes of the critters doing their thing and getting some kills. And while these moments are easily the highlight of the movie to me, they also confuse me. Because like I said before at the start of this section, this film is the first Critters movie to be rated R, specifically due to the violence. This would lead one to believe that it would be especially gory compared to what came before it, but it really isn't. In fact, this one is really tame by comparison. In Critters 2, for example, there is quite a lot of on-screen gore that happens throughout it, with some crazy practical effects for both the critters being killed as well as the people. In this movie though, practically everything is off-screen. Anytime a kill happens, there's always conveniently something that happens to cover it up, leading me to wonder why this one was given such a high age rating. It doesn't really make sense, but regardless, these scenes are fun anyways. There's some goofy kills, like this guy who mistakes a critter for a rag to clean himself with, and some random technician who gets swarmed by like 1,000,000 of them. And these scenes happen frequently enough that they were able to hold our attention after every boring scene with our main cast of characters. Speaking of which, the plot picks up a bit after our characters go on a walk in the forest, encountering a new kind of critter we've never seen before. A female critter that I had somehow accidentally guessed the identity of with some stupid throwaway joke I made early in the movie. Dude, I was waiting for like the scene to cut, and then it would like cut to the critters like, they kidnapped the critter queen or whatever. Like,
My critter queen.
That might actually be the plot. That might actually be the critter queen.
could you imagine?
Hillary Creighton, destroyer of critters.
Awesome.
Your Highness.
Is
Wait,
she
that
the
is the
queen
critter
of the
queen.
critters?
That's just a big bean.
Oh my gosh!
That means we got the critter princess.
Just keep rolling.
CGI there was so
Queen of
bad.
the critters. I want the queen of the critters, please.
Yeah, so turns out this critter is the queen critter, who is on Earth to stop the male critters from taking over the world? That's the explanation for this character that the movie gives us, and it makes absolutely no sense, but you know what? I'll roll with it because she is adorable, and watching a tiny fluff ball murdering other tiny fluff balls is surprisingly entertaining to watch when it happens. Anyways, after retrieving the queen critter and taking her with them, our main cast of characters become the target of the entire male critter army, now hunting them down to retrieve their leader. Or to kill her. I don't really know, it isn't made that clear. This leads to a bunch of different moments where the critters are seen hunting them down and killing a bunch of random side characters, as well as it occasionally cutting to Dee Wallace's character showing up, shooting a couple critters herself, and then disappearing for the majority of the film. Until eventually, they try to kill the town's sheriff, which leads to one of the most random things introduced to the series.
He's like Venom.
Boys in blue.
He's
Oh, he doesn't like the sound. Or he does like the sound, I'm not sure.
What?
Whoa!
It's just like Venom.
No.
It's just like Venom.
Yeah, so I guess critters are weak to loud noises? I have no idea where this came from or why it was introduced. Not only was this not established in any films prior, but it doesn't really add anything to this movie either. It only comes back in one scene later in the movie and barely helps the main cast of characters at all. It's super weird and is going to be a staple between this and the entry that follows it, so I guess keep this in mind? Anyways, after the sheriff's encounter with the critters, he arrives in the main town to tell the rest of the cast how to defeat them, after which we see that the entire town has become swarmed with the critters, killing everyone in sight and leading to one of the worst action sequences I have ever seen.
What is this guy like the leader or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
he's the pack
Okay.
leader.
Got it. Oh my gosh, yeah!
Fuck yeah.
That is
Fuck
gotta
yeah.
be my favorite line in the end. What?
Whoa! Makes no sense!
Slay.
Hold
I like
on.
this guy.
Didn't even get
You barely
close.
touched
That-
him.
That was terrible. That could have been so cool, but it's terrible. I'm so upset about that. That could have been fire.
That is just
The knife
It's
never
so
even
silly.
made contact.
they had to
That's
spare every
so
expense and
silly.
not wreck a single puppet.
I love this so much. This is
It's
so
so
That
cute.
could have
silly.
been so cool, though.
It was cool.
Shut the fuck up, AJ, you're so wrong!
After this horrible sequence ends with the new knowledge provided by the sheriff, our main cast of characters flee to the university, where the climax of the movie takes place. It's here where most of the action happens, and where it becomes abundantly clear that things happen in this movie with no rhyme or reason at all. Like, for example, the critter ball is back this time around, but instead of showing up for any good reason like it did in the second film, it appears for the sake of a single gag that happens and then disappears until the very end of the movie. This disorganized climax is filled with stuff like this, with it being very clear that the director had no idea how to end this movie, so they just threw in as many little action sequences and gags as possible. We have the critter ball randomly appearing as mentioned before, the queen critter having an out-of-place action sequence where she kills a bunch of her own kind, this horribly choreographed scene where all the teens fight with the critters with random tools, and this scene where D-Wallace finally arrives to help them, destroying the critter ball which allows... What? Yeah, I am being so serious with you right now when I tell you that that is actually how the movie ends. I did not edit that clip in any way, shape, or form. Need proof? Here was our live reaction to the ending during the watch party.
You kill like
That was fucking horrendous.
That was the worst thing I've ever seen.
That was
Told you aliens
horrible.
were real kill.
Why would you say that now?
Pull that quill out of his fucking neck. Oh my god.
You can't be serious. You cannot be serious.
This might take the cake for being the worst ending to any movie I've ever watched. I've shit on bad endings to films on this channel in the past. I've seen my fair share of bad ones, but at the very least those movies have endings. This isn't an ending at all. There is no closure, no conclusion to the conflict. It just feels like they ran out of budget and just had it cut to credits after the last scene they had filmed. It is beyond lazy and pissed me off more than anything else this movie did. It was a horrible ending to a horrible movie. And that was Critters Attack. Now, I apologize if my thoughts on this particular movie felt more disorganized than normal. I had to structure this section this way because this movie just had such little of substance outside of the big key moments I wanted to talk about, so it felt like I had to jump around a lot. Overall, this movie really provides nothing to the series. It's painfully boring at its worst, and at its best it manages to accomplish things that other entries in the series did far better. Mix that with the worst ending I have ever seen from any movie, and you have an entry I wouldn't recommend anyone watch unless they're a die-hard fan like me. The same cannot be said, however, for the next entry in the series, Critters: A New Binge. So let's take a look at that next, shall we? Critters: A New Binge was released in the same year as Critters Attack and is the first and only TV show in the entire series. The show was originally filmed to be a movie, but for whatever reason it got chopped down into 8 small episodes that spanned between 7 to 10 minutes long. And I just want to say right off the bat that this show is without a shadow of a doubt the dumbest, most ridiculous piece of media I have ever consumed. Not just from the Critters franchise, not just from any TV show, but from any piece of media. I cannot stress enough during this section that what I am about to describe to all of you is without any form of exaggeration or hyperbole. I am going to describe this show to you as accurately as I possibly can. With that said, let's talk about it, shall we? Critters: A New Binge opens with a lady brushing her teeth before getting attacked by a horrible-looking CGI monster, which quickly turns out to all be a part of a movie that the critters are watching on their ship. Their movie gets interrupted by a transmission, which we learn is coming from none other than the main villain of the entire show, the Critter President. Yeah, you heard me right. I said Critter President. I warned you this would be weird, and the show proves me right in the opening 2 minutes.
Doing here?
What
What? Critter president?
There being a critter president raises so many questions to me. Like, okay, in the previous movie, we saw there was a critter queen, and now there's a critter president. Does this mean the queen is the queen of the critters like a queen bee is to a hive? Or is she literally a political leader? Do the critters have politics? Who's more in charge, the queen or the president? Are there critter countries with different critter political structures? We've only just started and I have so many questions that will never be answered. Speaking of which, the president of the critters tells the crew of the ship that their main mission is to go to Earth and save a member of their species that was left there. And it's here where the story really starts, and we get to see some of the most horrible special effects I have ever seen in my entire life, as we see both the critter ship landing on Earth, as well as the bounty hunters touching down on the worst green screen known to man. After that insane introduction, we're met with our main cast of characters. Christopher, a teenager whose one defining character trait is that he eats a lot and nobody likes him. His mother, whose one defining character trait is that she is a whore. I'm not kidding, the show just tells us this. And Gilbert Gottfried, who they somehow convinced to even be here. It's these three characters that we see the most often, alongside some other side characters, and while they're all extremely one-note and cliche, would you believe me if I told you that is genuinely important to the story? Like, I'm not pulling your leg right now. The main defining character traits of both the mom and Christopher are really important to the story, no matter how stupid that sounds. So please keep that in mind for later. Now, in the early episodes of this show, not too much happens of real substance that moves the plot forward. The critters partake in random antics to find their lost comrade. We get to see some high school drama surrounding Christopher, that drama being that he eats a lot and nobody likes him. And we see that the mother consistently hooks up with some delivery guy. The plot really picks up in this show during the episode where the critters actually break into Christopher's house, with them believing that Gilbert Gottfried's pet owl was the captive critter they were hunting for, and it's suddenly being revealed that the delivery guy was actually one of the bounty hunters the entire time. He kills a bunch of critters in an action sequence that somehow looks even worse than anything from Critters Attack, before revealing to the mother that for whatever reason, it is actually Christopher that they were hunting after. They go to his school with the bounty hunter going to seemingly save him, only for it to then be revealed that he actually intends on killing him. The critters show up to the school, kill a bunch of people before fighting the bounty hunter, and they manage to capture both Christopher and his mother, which leads us to the big reveal of the show. It is here where we meet face to face with the critter president. And it is also here where I must remind all of you at home that what I'm about to describe is exactly what happens in the show. Christopher meets with the critter president, who, using a machine to be able to speak English, reveals to him that he is actually his biological father, and Christopher is part critter. He explains that Christopher's constant need to eat is a result of his critter DNA, and that he cannot control himself as a result of this. How can he be part critter, you ask? Well, that's because it also turns out that the mother once had a one-night stand with the critter president, which led to her getting pregnant for Christopher and never telling him. The entire plot of this show happens because the mother had sex with the fucking critter president and gave birth to his child. I told you that these one-note character traits would somehow be relevant to the story of this show. I fucking told you. And absolutely nothing could have prepared me for this shit. I originally liked this series unironically because I just thought they were solid monster flicks with good practical effects, but watching this show brings me a whole other kind of enjoyment. This show is just such a dumpster fire that I can't stop watching. It's so poorly acted, the story is so stupid, the effects are so bad, but I can't help but love every minute of it. And would you believe me if I told you that it somehow gets even worse, cause it absolutely does. After this massive twist is revealed to us, the critters get a message from the bounty hunters telling them that if they don't hand over Christopher, his friends will die. At first, the critters are reluctant, but after Christopher threatens his own life with breath mints, they agree to turn the ship around and save the day. It's here where the show reaches its climax, attacks, with Christopher fighting alongside all the other critters to defeat the bounty hunters. This action sequence is beyond insane. We see critters running around killing everyone, Christopher rolls in like a fucking human meatball, shooting his bat quills at the bounty hunters, the mother strangles the president to death with a belt before getting killed herself, there's a red critter that makes people explode, and that's just how it starts. The sequence reaches its end when the bounty hunters are defeated and Christopher turns on his own species, stealing a remote and killing them using a high-frequency noise.
I do it would.
Oh my god!
That was actually a very good reference.
Movie!
That was actually a great reference.
Love this show.
And with that, the day is saved and all of our characters live happily ever after. Or so it seems, because not long after this we get an ending scene which reveals that the critters managed to get a sample of Christopher's own DNA, creating a production line of Christopher clones to take over the world with in the next season. If there ever was one. Yeah, to nobody's surprise, this show wasn't too popular, with it only ever streaming on Shudder and being taken off that streaming service not too long ago. A truly tragic end to the Critters franchise. That was Critters: A New Binge, the most ridiculous, awful piece of Critters media that exists, but also one of my absolute favorites. I loved every minute of watching this series. Unlike other bad Critters movies that were just boring, this one absolutely falls under the category of so bad it's good to me. The characters are so insanely stupid, the writing is some of the most absurd I've ever seen, and the effects are so garbage that I've seen better from PlayStation 2 games. If you want a good laugh and something that you aren't supposed to take even remotely seriously, I couldn't recommend this entry in the series enough. It's terrible, but it's the kind of terrible that a group of friends could have a fun time watching like mine did. And to me, that is far better than what the last two films I watched had going for them. Critters was a franchise that I had never expected to see come back in any way, shape, or form after the abomination that was Critters 4. So you can imagine my surprise when I discovered not only a movie, but a whole TV show being made a whole 27 years later. The new age of Critters, as I've called it, is bad. It is really bad at that. But honestly, that didn't really stop me from enjoying it. While Critters Attack was a bad movie with little to offer, the TV show Critters: A New Binge was surprisingly fun to watch despite its many, many shortcomings. Do these entries make the future of the franchise look promising? No, I think Critters is dead and it's going to stay that way for a while. But hey, at least we have something fun to watch in the series' absence. As a fan of Critters, it does hurt me to see that we probably won't ever get an actual good entry in the series ever again, but honestly, I'm happy with what we got. Anyways though, that'll be all from me for now. I hope you enjoyed these two videos covering the Critters franchise as much as I enjoyed making them. It always means a lot to see that you made it this far into the video, and I can't wait to see you here in whatever my next video ends up being. Goodbye for now. So how was that? You happy we finally got to watch some Critters movies together?
No, somehow I feel even worse. Those were both terrible. They were nothing like the Critters franchise I've grown to love. Why is it that every horror franchise I love gets ruined like this? It isn't fair.
Aw, come on, don't be like that. I'm sure you and I will find something worth watching. I'll just keep looking around and I'll be sure to let you know once I find something more enjoyable for us to watch.
Thank you, Pastor.